At Thanksgiving, my dad said, "We're selling our family company. You get nothing." My brothers cheered. I grinned. "Dad, who's buying it?" He smirked. "Everest Holdings, they're offering $50 million. I chuckled. "Dad, I am Everest Holdings." The whole room froze. The text message changed everything. One innocent notification, and I knew my life, and my family, would never be the same. My father thought he was about to drop a bomb at Thanksgiving dinner, but he had no idea I was about to detonate one of my own. The air in our grand Philadelphia mansion that Thanksgiving was thick with suppressed excitement. My father, Richard Davies, kept checking his phone, whispering conspiratorially to my mother, Eleanor. They were so absorbed, so sure of their world, they didn't see the storm brewing right under their noses. They had drastically underestimated me. I grew up in Chestnut Hill, one of Philadelphia's wealthiest suburbs, in a sprawling colonial with more rooms than we knew what to do with. On the surface, we were the perfect American success story. My grandfather, Arthur Davies, started Davies Software in his garage back in 1978. He built it from nothing, and my father took it from a $10 million family business to a $50 million enterprise. Every holiday, every vacation, every barbecue was a grand display of his business genius. The Davies name became synonymous with success, and Richard never let us forget it. There were 3 of us. My older brother, Caleb, 38, was the golden child. Despite a communications degree and a college career spent partying, Dad handed him a vice president position the day after graduation. Caleb spent more time on his boat than in the office, yet Dad was convinced he was the natural heir. Then there was me, Harper, perpetually stuck in the middle at 32. Unlike my siblings, I inherited my grandfather's passion. I taught myself to code at 12, built my first app at 15. I studied computer science and business at Stanford University, graduated with honors, and had genuinely innovative ideas for modernizing the company. But Dad always looked right through me, like I was invisible. My younger sister, Brooke, 29, completed our trio. She leveraged our family name into a lifestyle influencer career, posting curated glimpses of old money East Coast living. Zero interest in software, yet she never missed a chance to tag Davies Software in her perfectly posed Instagram stories. Mom, Eleanor, came from old Philadelphia money and approached family conflict like all proper society wives, by ignoring it and pouring another Chardonnay. She played peacekeeper but enabled Dad's dismissiveness of my business acumen. "Richard, maybe you should listen to Harper's idea," she'd occasionally suggest at dinner, only to backtrack when Dad shot her that look. "Eleanor, please. This is actual business." Then he'd turn back to Caleb, resuming their conversation about golf or yacht clubs. Family gatherings always revolved around business talk that somehow excluded me. If I tried to contribute, Dad would smile condescendingly, "That's sweet, Harper. But leave the business discussions to people who understand the real world." The breaking point hit when I was 22. Fresh out of Stanford, I developed a cloud-based integration solution that could have revolutionized our products years before competitors did. I spent months perfecting a comprehensive pitch. Dad finally agreed to let me present it at a board meeting, supposedly of professional courtesy. I still remember walking into that mahogany-paneled boardroom, laptop in hand, heart pounding. The board members, all men in their 50s and 60s, Dad's friends for decades, watched with polite, distant expressions. 10 minutes into my presentation, Dad checked his watch, sighed loudly, and stopped me. "I think we've seen enough," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Harper, sweetheart, this is all very creative, but completely impractical for a serious enterprise like ours. Our clients want stability, not experimental technologies." He shrugged apologetically to the board. "My daughter recently graduated college and is full of these academic ideas. Now, shall we move on to actual business matters?" The humiliation burned through me as I packed my materials. They chuckled, moving on as if I'd never been there. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave Philadelphia and the family business behind. I would build something so successful, my father couldn't dismiss it. I moved to Austin with $5,000 in savings. My parents assumed it was a phase, a tantrum. "She'll be back when she runs out of money," I overheard Dad telling Mom during one of our increasingly rare calls. Those early years were brutal. My tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood devoured almost my entire monthly budget. I survived on ramen and coffee, working 80-hour weeks. Every dollar I saved went into building my own company. I created Everest Holdings under the pseudonym Emmy Stone. The E stood for Alara, my middle name. I wanted my success or failure completely disconnected from the Davies name. I started small, developing custom enterprise solutions, reinvesting every profit. By year 3, I had 10 employees and an office in South Congress. The breakthrough came with a proprietary integration platform, ironically, similar to the one I'd pitched to my father years earlier. Venture capital came calling, but I maintained majority ownership. Over the next 7 years, I strategically acquired smaller tech companies. Everest Holdings grew to a $200 million valuation with offices in 3 cities. Throughout it all, I maintained my pseudonym. In the tech world, Emmy Stone was known as a brilliant, reclusive founder. My family remained completely unaware. During holiday calls, I'd keep conversations vague, doing okay, still figuring things out. Dad never pressed for details, having long written off my career as inconsequential. This suited me perfectly. What they didn't know is that for the past year, I had been strategically acquiring shares in companies that were key suppliers and clients of Davies Software. 6 months ago, I had my CFO send an anonymous acquisition offer through a third party. My father, predictably, rejected it without proper consideration. Now, 10 years after that boardroom humiliation, I was returning home for Thanksgiving with a plan. Davies Software was struggling. My father didn't know it yet, but I was about to become his worst nightmare and his only salvation. The week before Thanksgiving, I was in my corner office overlooking the Austin skyline, finalizing paperwork for the most important deal of my life. My assistant confirmed my private jet for Tuesday. "Are you sure you don't want your executive team in Philadelphia for the signing?" she asked. I shook my head. "This is personal. I need to handle it alone." My best friend, Sophia, called later. "Are you really going through with this family Thanksgiving charade?" she asked. "After everything they did? After 2 years of barely speaking to them?" I sighed, spinning in my chair to face the window. "I have to be there in person. I need to see his face." "I remember the last Christmas disaster," Sophia said gently. "Your father announced Caleb's promotion to executive vice president while you sat there with your unacknowledged Series B funding round. You came back to Austin and didn't speak to them for months." The memory stung. "This time will be different," I promised. "Everything changes this Thanksgiving." I spent the evening packing, deliberately choosing my wardrobe. Gone were the casual clothes my family associated with me. Instead, I packed bespoke suits, a Chanel dress for dinner, Louis Vuitton heels, and the subtle signifiers of success only the wealthy truly recognize: a Patek Philippe watch, a Bottega Veneta handbag, Tiffany diamond earrings. None of it ostentatious, all of it unmistakably expensive. After years of deliberately downplaying my success, I wanted them to see glimpses before the final revelation. Tuesday morning, I boarded the private jet I rarely used. The trip warranted the exception. During the 5-hour flight, I reviewed the contract one last time, ensuring every detail was perfect. The jet landed at a private airfield outside Philadelphia. A black Bentley waited. As we drove through familiar neighborhoods toward Chestnut Hill, a strange mixture of nostalgia and hardening determination settled within me. The Davies estate looked exactly as it always had. Imposing colonial architecture, manicured grounds dusted with November snow. Mom answered the door, bypassing the housekeeper. Her eyes widened as she took in my appearance. "Harper, darling," she said, embracing me. the scent of expensive perfume and a faint note of midday wine. You look different. Is that a Rolex? Patek Philippe, actually, I said, returning her hug. Good to see you, Mom. She ushered me inside, chattering about Thanksgiving preparations and Brooke's latest Instagram milestone. I nodded politely, setting my bag in the grand foyer. Home sweet home, with all its complicated memories. Your father's in his study, Mom said. He's been very busy with some big deal. Very hush-hush, even with me. I smiled. I'll say hello. Dad's study had always been somewhat forbidden territory. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response, a small act of defiance. He looked up from his desk, surprise flickering before settling into his usual mild disinterest. Harper, you made it. He stood for a brief, awkward hug. The trip from Austin was good? Very smooth, I said, deliberately not taking the offered seat. I flew private. Saves time. A momentary confusion crossed his features. Private? That must have been expensive. I shrugged. Business is good. Before he could inquire further, his phone rang. Excuse me, this is important, he said, turning away. I used the opportunity to glance at the papers on his desk. There it was, the Everest Holdings acquisition proposal, my company logo prominently displayed. My heart raced, but I maintained my composure. Sorry about that, he said, finishing his call, gathering the papers into a folder. Big things happening at the company. You wouldn't understand. The familiar dismissal rolled off me like water now. Of course, Dad. I'll let you get back to it. I went upstairs to my old bedroom, a shrine to my teenage self. Debate trophies, computer science awards, Stanford pennants still adorned the walls, dusty testaments to achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I sought most. Downstairs, Caleb was already drinking scotch at 3 p.m. Well, the prodigal sister returns, he said, raising his glass. Still playing with computers in Austin? Something like that, I replied with a tight smile. How's your little startup doing? Making any money yet? His condescension was so familiar, it almost felt like home. Before I could answer, Brooke burst in, phone held at the perfect angle. Harper's here, everyone. Family reunion time, she announced to her followers before air-kissing my cheeks. You look expensive, sis. Did you finally find a rich boyfriend? No, just working hard, I said, stepping out of her camera frame. Caleb brought in his new girlfriend, Chloe. Amber, Brooke stage whispered, still recording. She's 24 and does yoga professionally. Chloe, willowy and perfectly dressed, entered. Caleb pulled her to his side. Chloe, this is my sister Harper. She lives in Austin and does tech stuff. His vague wave dismissed a decade of my professional accomplishments. Oh my God, I love Austin. The shopping is amazing. Chloe gushed. Our awkward small talk was interrupted by Dad's raised voice from his study. The words were muffled, but his excited tone carried. Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow after Thanksgiving. $50 million is the final offer. Everest Holdings has been very insistent on the terms. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. Elena, our housekeeper of 20 years, was preparing vegetables. Miss Harper, she smiled warmly. It is good to see you. You look well. Austin agrees with you. Thanks, Elena. Need any help? She shook her head. Your mother wants everything perfect for tomorrow. Big day, she says. Your father has news. I nodded, wondering if the entire household staff knew about the sale before his own children did. So I gathered. The pre-dinner drinks hour was excruciating. Mom fluttered about with forced cheerfulness. Dad checked his phone every 3 minutes. Caleb bragged about his new boat. Brooke documented everything for her followers. I sipped my wine slowly, observing the family dynamics with new eyes. No longer the hurt daughter seeking validation, but a successful businesswoman about to change the game entirely. "Dinner is ready," Mom finally announced, ushering us toward the formal dining room. I took a deep breath, knowing that by the time dessert was served, nothing would ever be the same. The massive mahogany dining table gleamed under the crystal chandelier, set with the Wedgwood china that only emerged for special occasions. Sterling silver candelabras cast a warm glow over the autumnal centerpiece. I noted with mild amusement that I'd been seated at the far end of the table, as far from Dad at the head as possible. Typical. Caleb sat at Dad's right, Brooke at his left. Mom took her traditional place at the opposite end, with me beside her, symbolically separated from the inner circle. Elena and the kitchen staff brought out course after course. Dad carved the 25-pound turkey with ceremonial precision while Brooke filmed for social media. And here's Daddy carving the turkey, just like his father before him, continuing the Davies family tradition of excellence in everything they do. I caught Mom wincing, taking a large sip of wine. By my count, it was her 4th glass since I'd arrived. Once our plates were filled, Dad raised his glass for the traditional Davies family gratitude ritual, a competitive status report. Caleb went first. "I'm thankful for another record-breaking quarter at Davies Software," he began, though I knew from my research that the company had lost market share for the 3rd consecutive quarter. "And for my new 42-foot yacht, the Davies Legacy. And for new beginnings with this amazing woman." Chloe giggled. Brooke made exaggerated gagging motions when Caleb wasn't looking. Brooke went next, phone still in hand. "I'm so thankful to have reached 1 million followers this year. My collaboration with Luxury Life Cosmetics has been amazing, and I'm grateful to be a Davies and represent our family brand to the world." She beamed at Dad, who nodded approvingly. When my turn came, I set down my fork and spoke clearly. "I'm thankful for the lessons life has taught me. That sometimes rejection leads to the right path, that persistence matters more than privilege, and that success is the best teacher." I raised my glass. "To finding your own way." Dad frowned slightly, but quickly moved on to his own gratitude speech, which predictably centered on the business legacy he had built. Mom offered generic thanks for family and health, her words slightly slurred. Throughout the meal, Dad seemed distracted, checking his phone under the table, occasionally whispering to Mom, whose smile grew increasingly strained. As Elena brought in the pumpkin and pecan pies, Dad suddenly tapped his knife against his crystal water glass, the sharp ping cutting through the conversation. "I have an announcement to make," he said, standing, his voice commanding. "One that affects everyone here." The table fell silent. Even Brooke lowered her phone. "As you know, I have dedicated my life to building Davies Software into an industry leader. But all good things evolve, and the time has come for change." He paused dramatically. "I have decided to sell the company." Caleb choked on his wine. "What? Dad, you can't be serious." Dad raised his hand for silence. "I have been in negotiations for months with a very interested buyer. The deal will be finalized tomorrow." Brooke gasped theatrically. "But Daddy, what about the Davies legacy? My brand is built around being a Davies." "That brings me to the second part of my announcement," Dad continued, his expression unreadable. "The proceeds from the sale will not be going to you children as inheritance." Both Caleb and Brooke erupted. "That's our birthright." Caleb slammed his fist on the table. "What do you mean?" Brooke wailed, live-streaming the drama. "Where is the money going?" Dad waited for their outbursts to subside. "Your mother and I will be using part of it for our retirement. The rest will go to establishing the Davies Foundation, a charitable organization to support technology education." "This is ridiculous." Caleb stood, his face flushed. "I've given 10 years to this company. You promised it would be mine someday. You promised all of us. Brooke joined in, tears streaming, but her phone was angled perfectly for her most flattering crying shot. Throughout the chaos, I remained perfectly still, taking small, deliberate bites of pecan pie. Mom noticed my calm. "Harper," she said quietly. "You don't seem surprised." The table quieted as everyone turned toward me. "Actually," I said, setting down my dessert fork with precision. "I have just one question." I looked directly at my father. "Who is the buyer?" Dad's chest puffed with pride. "A very successful tech investment firm called Everest Holdings. They're paying $50 million, which is more than generous given our recent market challenges." I took a sip of water, steadying myself. The room felt charged. "Dad," I said finally, my voice calm and clear. "I am Everest Holdings." The room went completely silent. I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking seconds of frozen disbelief. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. I watched the emotions play across my father's face: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, the first flickers of anger. Caleb was the first to react, knocking over his wineglass as he stood. Red liquid spread like blood across the white tablecloth. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded, looking between Dad and me. Brooke, incredibly, was still live streaming. "Oh my God," she whispered to her phone, "did my sister just say she owns Everest Holdings, the company buying our family business?" Mom reached for her wineglass, found it empty, and grabbed the bottle. I stood slowly, a strange sense of calm washing over me after carrying this secret for so long. "Emmy Stone," I said. "Harper Alara Stone. That's the name I've been using professionally for the past decade while building Everest Holdings into a $200 million company." Dad found his voice. "This is preposterous," he sputtered. "Everest Holdings is run by Emmy Stone, a respected technology investor. Not by my daughter, who has been playing at startups in Austin." I reached into my purse and removed my business card case, sleek brushed platinum with the Everest Holdings logo. I slid a card across the table toward him. "Actually, Dad, I am Emmy Stone. I founded Everest Holdings 10 years ago, after you dismissed my business proposal and humiliated me in front of your board." Dad snatched the card, staring at it. "This is some kind of joke," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Everest Holdings now owns controlling interests in Nexus Technologies, Data Stream Solutions, and TechCore Industries," I continued, naming Davies Software's 3 largest suppliers. "We also recently acquired majority stakes in your 2 biggest clients, McKinsey Manufacturing and Westfield Distribution. The Davies Software acquisition is the final piece in a strategic plan I've been implementing for the past 18 months. You've been spying on our business," Caleb accused, his face mottled with rage. "That's corporate espionage." "No, Caleb. It's called market research. Everything I learned about Davies Software came from publicly available financial reports, industry analysis, and completely legal channels." I turned back to Dad. "The truth is, Davies Software has been failing for years. Your technology is outdated, your management practices are from the last century, and you've lost 22% market share in the past 3 years." "How dare you?" Dad began, but I cut him off. "I tried to help you first. 6 months ago, Everest Holdings sent an anonymous partnership proposal that would have allowed the Davies name to remain while providing the capital and technology upgrades you desperately needed. You rejected it without even reading past the first page." Dad's eyes widened in recognition. "The Phoenix proposal? That was you?" I nodded. "I wanted to give you a chance to accept help without knowing it came from me. Your pride wouldn't allow it. So this whole time you've been plotting against your own family?" Caleb shouted. "Planning to steal our company?" "Not steal, Caleb. Purchase, legally. For $50 million, which is honestly more than its current market value." I kept my voice level. And let's be clear, this company stopped being our family business the day Dad made it evident that only one child would ever have a meaningful role in it, despite that child's complete lack of qualifications or interest in technology. Brooke finally lowered her phone, the reality sinking in. "So, you're going to be our boss now?" she asked in a small voice. "Technically, yes," I confirmed. "Though the current management structure will be completely reorganized." Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping. "This deal is off," he declared. "I will not sell my company to my own daughter as some kind of revenge plot." I shook my head slowly. "The contracts are signed, Dad. The board has approved the sale. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Legally, Everest Holdings already owns Davies Software." "I'll fight this," he threatened. "My lawyers have already vetted the deal extensively," I interrupted gently. "They advised you it was the best offer you'd get in the current market." "What exactly will you tell them now? That you're upset because the brilliant CEO you've been negotiating with turns out to be your daughter?" Mom spoke for the first time since my revelation, her words slightly slurred, but her gaze surprisingly clear. "All these years, Harper, all these years you were building this while you thought I was failing, I finished for her." "Yes, exactly." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You have a choice to make right now, Harper. You can be my daughter, or you can be the person who took my company. You cannot be both." The ultimatum hung in the air, so predictable it almost made me sad. 10 years ago, it would have devastated me. Now, it merely confirmed what I had always known. "That is where you are wrong, Dad," I said quietly. "I am both. I always have been. You just refuse to see it." Brooke had started crying in earnest now, mascara tracking down her perfectly contoured cheeks. "What happens to us? To our trust funds? Our positions?" "That depends," I answered honestly, "on whether you want to actually work for the company or just claim its benefits." Caleb pointed an accusing finger. "You planned this for Thanksgiving deliberately, didn't you? To humiliate us in front of the whole family?" "I planned it for Thanksgiving because I knew everyone would be here," I corrected him. "And because 10 years ago, at Thanksgiving dinner, Dad announced that he was promoting you to vice president despite your complete lack of qualifications, while telling me my degree from Stanford and 3 years of coding experience wasn't enough to warrant even an entry-level management position." Dad's face flushed at the reminder. "That was different. Caleb is my son, my firstborn." "And there it is," I said softly. "The real reason I was never given a chance. Not my ideas, not my education, not my work ethic. Just my gender." The painful truth silenced the room again. Even Caleb looked uncomfortable. "This conversation is over," Dad finally declared. "Everyone out. I need to call my attorneys." He stormed from the dining room, the sound of his study doors slamming echoing moments later. Mom rose unsteadily. "I should go check on him," she murmured, though she paused beside my chair. "Are you really worth $200 million? I nodded. "And all those times you couldn't come home for Christmas because you said you couldn't afford the plane ticket. I was running a company, Mom. And I needed you all to keep underestimating me." She touched my shoulder briefly, an unreadable expression on her face, then followed after Dad. As the dining room emptied, I remained seated, looking at the abandoned Thanksgiving feast. The turkey grew cold, the candles burned low. The family I had once desperately wanted to impress had scattered in shock and anger. It should have felt like victory. Instead, a hollow ache spread through my chest. I had finally earned their attention, but I was further than ever from earning their understanding. I retreated to my childhood bedroom. Through the floor, I could hear Dad shouting on the phone, Mom's placating tones rising and falling. Occasionally, Caleb's angry voice joined the cacophony, followed by Brooke's dramatic wailing. My old room remained frozen in time, a museum to the person I had been. The twin bed, the desk where I'd spent countless hours coding and dreaming, the bookshelves lined with computer science textbooks. Debate trophies and academic medals gathered dust, achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I sought most. I ran my fingers along the spines of my old journals, pulling one out. Inside were detailed business plans, algorithm sketches, and notes for the very cloud integration platform that had eventually become Everest's flagship product. The irony was not lost on me. Everything I had built had begun right here, in the room where I had felt most invisible. A sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Caleb, his tie loosened, face flushed with anger or alcohol, possibly both. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door, arms crossed. "About what, Caleb?" "How I ruined your Thanksgiving. Or how you plan to inherit a company you helped run into the ground." "You think you're so clever?" he hissed, pacing the small space. Little Harper with her computers and her secret identity. "Did you enjoy lying to our faces all these years?" "About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas," I replied evenly. "Remember when I suggested Davies Software should move to cloud-based solutions 6 years ago during Christmas dinner? Dad dismissed it as trendy tech jargon, but 3 months later, you presented the exact same concept as your own strategic vision." Caleb stopped pacing, his expression darkening. "I was the one who stayed. I was the one who put in the time at the company while you ran off to Austin to prove some point." "You put in time?" "Yes, but what did you actually contribute, Caleb? Besides expenses on the company credit card for client dinners at strip clubs, and a corner office you use primarily for naps between hangovers?" His face contorted with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about. I brought in the Westfield account. Westfield came to Davies Software because I personally reached out to their CTO as Emmy Stone and recommended your services as part of my long-term acquisition strategy," I informed him. "And I know exactly what I'm talking about, because I've been auditing the company remotely for the past year as part of my due diligence, including the financial records you thought were only accessible on the local server." The color drained from his face. "What are you saying?" "I know about the $300,000 you embezzled through fake vendor accounts, Caleb. I know about the phantom consulting fees that went directly to your personal offshore account. I know everything." I held his gaze steadily. "I'm not planning to pursue criminal charges. That would hurt the company during the transition. But don't test me. You," he whispered, hands clenching into fists. "You'd destroy your own brother?" "I would hold accountable a thief who happens to be related to me," I corrected him. "There's a difference." We stood in tense silence until he finally turned away. "This isn't over," he warned, yanking open the door. "Actually, it is," I said to his retreating back. "You just don't realize it yet." I had barely closed the door when another knock came. This time, it was Brooke, her makeup freshly touched up despite the tear tracks still visible. "So, you're like a secret millionaire," she said without preamble, immediately sitting on my bed. "That's actually kind of badass." I couldn't help but laugh at her rapid pivot. "Is that what you were going with? 5 minutes ago, you were crying about losing your era status." She shrugged, examining her manicure. "I'm adaptable. It's essential for influencer longevity." She looked up with sudden calculation. "Just think of the content we could create together. My sister, the tech mogul. My followers would eat that up." "Is that why you're here, Brooke? To propose a business collaboration?" "More like a mutual arrangement," she said, smoothing her dress. "You need a media presence for your company that humanizes you. And I need an authentic connection to actual business success instead of just looking pretty with products." The nakedly transactional nature of her proposal was so typically Brooke that I almost admired it. "And what about actually working for the company, learning the business, contributing something beyond your Instagram aesthetic?" She wrinkled her nose. God, no. Coding is boring, and business meetings make me want to die. But I could be like the brand ambassador. The face of the company for the lifestyle market. The face of an enterprise software integration platform for the lifestyle market? I repeated slowly. Do you hear yourself? Brooke stood, straightening her shoulders. Fine. Mock me like everyone else in this family. But my social media skills are actually valuable in today's market, whether you respect them or not. I've built my own brand from nothing, just like you did. The parallel had never occurred to me, and I found myself momentarily speechless. There was a strange truth to it, though our methods and values diverged dramatically. I'll think about it, I said finally, but not tonight. She nodded, apparently satisfied. Just so you know, I've already posted about a major family business shakeup without specifics. My engagement is through the roof. After she left, I sat at my old desk, powering up my laptop to check the final details for tomorrow's announcement. A gentle knock interrupted me again. Come in, I called, expecting Elena. Instead, Mom entered, looking surprisingly sober given the amount of wine she'd consumed. She had changed from her dinner dress into a cashmere sweater and slacks, her armor of society wife temporarily set aside. Your father has locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch and the company bylaws, she said, settling into the window seat where she used to read me stories as a child. He's convinced there must be some loophole to stop the sale. There isn't, I said simply. His lawyers already confirmed it. She nodded, looking around the room thoughtfully. You know, I kept everything exactly as you left it. I always thought you'd come back once you got this rebellion out of your system. It was never a rebellion, Mom. It was a career, a life. $200 million, she mused, shaking her head. My little girl built a company worth $200 million in secret while we all thought you were struggling. I turned to face her fully. You could have asked, Mom. Any of you could have shown genuine interest in what I was doing, but none of you ever really wanted to know. Tears welled in her eyes. I knew, Harper. Not the details, not the scale of your success. But I knew you were special. I saw it when you were little. The way your mind worked differently, how you understood things the rest of us couldn't grasp. She wiped at her cheeks. I just didn't know how to help you in a family like ours, with a man like your father. You could have stood up for me, I said, the old hurt rising unexpectedly in my throat. All those times he dismissed me, humiliated me. You just sat there. I was wrong, she admitted quietly. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a supportive wife. But I failed as a mother when you needed an advocate. The simple acknowledgement pierced something long frozen inside me. I had come prepared for anger, for accusations, even legal threats. I had not prepared for genuine remorse. What happens now? Mom asked after a long silence. Tomorrow morning, the acquisition becomes public. Davies Software will become a subsidiary of Everest Holdings. The company name will remain for now, but operations will be completely restructured. I hesitated, then added, Dad and Caleb will be offered advisory positions with no actual authority if they want them, mostly for appearance's sake during the transition. And you, she said, will you move back to Philadelphia? I shook my head. I'll remain in Austin. We'll install a new management team here. She nodded, seeming to understand all I was not saying, that I had outgrown this house, this family dynamic, this version of myself. Your father may never forgive you for this, she warned softly. I know, I acknowledged. But this isn't about forgiveness, Mom. It's about finally being seen. After she left, I worked until dawn, ignoring Sophia's texts. As the first gray light of morning filtered through my curtains, I changed into an Armani suit, styled my hair into a sleek chignon, and applied the subtle makeup Emmy Stone was known for. The morning would bring either a new beginning for the Davies family or its final fracturing. Either way, I was ready. The kitchen was eerily quiet when I came down at 7 a.m. Elena silently handed me a cup of coffee, her eyes communicating a mixture of concern and respect. The formal dining room had been cleared of last night's disaster. No evidence remained of the family explosion, except the lingering tension. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my executive team, eager for updates. A text from Sophia, "Did you drop the bomb? Are they still breathing?" I had just finished responding when Dad appeared in the doorway. He looked older than yesterday, his posture slightly stooped. He hadn't slept. My study now, his tone left no room for discussion. I followed him to the room that had always been the center of Davy's family power. Wood-paneled walls covered with framed accolades, business journal covers featuring Dad, photos with politicians. Conspicuously absent was any recognition of my achievements, though my Stanford graduation photo sat on a side table, half hidden. Dad took his seat behind the massive desk. I chose not to sit in the visitor's chair, instead perching on the edge of the desk itself, a subtle repositioning of our power dynamic that did not go unnoticed. "My attorneys confirm what you said last night," he began without preamble. "The sale is legally binding." The board vote was unanimous. "Of course it was," I replied. "Davy's software has been losing market share for 3 years. Your technology is outdated, your management structure is bloated, and your development pipeline is empty." The board recognized a good offer when they saw it. $50 million, he said, shaking his head. The company was valued at $70 million just 2 years ago. The company was overvalued 2 years ago, I corrected. And I offered more than any other potential buyer would have. Most would have stripped the assets and dissolved the Davies name entirely. He looked up sharply. "And is that your plan? To erase your own family legacy?" "No. Despite everything, I respect what grandfather built and what you expanded. The Davies name stays, though the company structure will change significantly." For the first time, uncertainty crossed his features. "What exactly are your plans?" I had waited 10 years for him to ask my opinion on business matters. The irony was not lost on me. Davies Software will become the enterprise division of Everest Holdings, focusing on updating your legacy products and integrating them with our cloud platforms. We will retain approximately 60% of the current staff, with significant changes to upper management. "And me?" he asked, the question clearly costing him. "You will be offered a position as chairman emeritus. No operational authority, but you'll maintain an office and can advise on client relationships during the transition." His jaw tightened. "A figurehead role." "A respected advisory position," I countered, "with full benefits and a generous compensation package." He stood abruptly, walking to the window overlooking the immaculately maintained garden. For a long moment, he said nothing, his back to me, staring out at the property that generations of Davies' success had built. "How did you do it?" he finally asked, his voice quieter now. "Build something that valuable when you had nothing. No connections, no startup capital." "I had my education," I reminded him, "the one thing you couldn't take from me. And I had tremendous motivation to prove you wrong." He turned back. "I expected you to fail. I know everyone does. 90% of startups never make it past the first 3 years. I thought," he hesitated, "I thought I was protecting you from inevitable disappointment. By ensuring I never got the chance to try?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's not protection, Dad. That's control." He flinched. "Perhaps. I built this company from what my father started. Expanded it tenfold. I thought I knew best. But you didn't," I said simply. "You were wrong about me. Wrong about the direction of the industry. Wrong about Caleb being the natural successor." At the mention of my brother, Dad's expression darkened. "Caleb may have his flaws, but he's been loyal to this company. Caleb has been embezzling from the company for at least 3 years, I informed him bluntly. I have all the documentation. That's part of why I moved now, before he could do more damage. Dad sank back into his chair. The shock of this new revelation apparently too much. That cannot be true. $300,000 siphoned through fake vendor accounts. The evidence is irrefutable. Why would he need to steal? He makes a generous salary. Has a trust fund. Gambling debts, I said. Sports betting, mostly, from what I can tell. Dad buried his face in his hands, then looked up, suddenly appearing every one of his 68 years. So both my son and my company were failing, and I was too blind to see either. The naked vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. I had expected more anger, not this broken acceptance. Not blind, I said, softening my tone slightly, just looking in the wrong direction. A long silence stretched between us, filled with decades of misunderstanding. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, the arrogance replaced with something approaching genuine curiosity. How did you do it? Really? No connections, no investors who knew the Davies name. How did you build something so successful? I considered deflecting, but there was something in his question that seemed sincere for the first time. I started small, I explained. Freelance development work to build capital. Then I created a proprietary integration platform that solved a problem every enterprise company has, connecting legacy systems with modern cloud architecture. It was actually based on the proposal you dismissed when I was 22. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. The one with the middleware solution? I nodded, surprised he remembered that much. Yes. I refined it, made it more adaptable, used it to attract our first major clients. Reinvested every profit. Lived in a studio apartment eating ramen for 3 years to keep overhead low. Built a team of brilliant people who believed in the vision. Without the Davies name to open doors, he mused. Because of that, in some ways, I corrected. Being underestimated is a powerful position if you know how to use it. No one saw me coming. He almost smiled at that. Clearly not. Another silence fell, but different now, less hostile. I checked my watch. The press release goes out in 45 minutes. We should discuss next steps. What about Caleb and Brooke? He asked. Caleb will be offered a choice, resign quietly with a reasonable severance, or face potential legal consequences for the embezzlement. Brooke, I paused. Brooke actually made a compelling case last night for serving as a brand ambassador. Her social media skills are legitimately valuable in the right context. Dad looked genuinely surprised. You'd keep them involved? After everything? This was never about destroying the family, Dad. It was about claiming my place in it, on my terms. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the papers on his desk, then rising again to meet mine with unexpected directness. You outmaneuvered me completely, he said. And I was startled to detect a note of something almost like pride in his voice. Your grandfather would have been impressed. Coming from him, it was as close to approval as I had ever received. I felt a complicated emotion rising in my chest. Not quite vindication, not quite forgiveness, but something in the space between. I learned from watching you, I acknowledged, even when you didn't think I was paying attention. He extended his hand across the desk. So, Chairman Emeritus? I took his hand, sealing the first professional agreement we had ever made as equals. Welcome to Everest Holdings, Dad. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, I stood in the newly renovated headquarters of Davies Everest Technologies. The former Davies software building had been transformed with open workspaces, state-of-the-art technology, and a collaborative environment that respected the company's history while embracing its future. My role as CEO of Everest Holdings meant I split my time between Austin and Philadelphia, overseeing the integration. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been more successful than even my optimistic projections. Dad had surprised everyone by embracing his chairman emeritus role with unexpected grace. He found satisfaction in mentoring younger team members and maintaining client relationships. We established a weekly meeting where he could offer insights, and I found myself actually looking forward to these sessions. For the first time, we were building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than expectations and disappointments. Caleb's situation had been more complicated. After facing the evidence of his embezzlement, he initially threatened legal action. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed. He accepted a conditional offer, repayment of stolen funds, resignation, and enrollment in an MBA program if he wanted any future role in the business. To my surprise, he chose education over exile and was now halfway through his first semester, calling occasionally with genuine questions about business strategy. Brooke had flourished as brand ambassador for our consumer products division, a small but growing part of the business that benefited from her social media expertise. Her followers were captivated by the dramatic family business saga, which she carefully presented as a story of female empowerment and family reconciliation. Her Tech Ace rebrand had opened doors to younger markets we had struggled to reach. Mom had perhaps changed the most. She started volunteering with women's education initiatives and even joined the board of a tech incubator for female founders. "I want to help other girls like you," she told me, "so their mothers don't make the same mistakes I did." As I walked through the office, employees nodded respectfully or smiled. I was no longer Emmy Stone, the mysterious founder, nor Harper Davies, the forgotten middle child. I was simply Harper, the CEO, who had modernized a failing family business and created new opportunities. My assistant interrupted my thoughts. "Your father is waiting in the conference room with the quarterly reports," she informed me, "and your mother called to confirm dinner tonight with the potential investors." I thanked her and headed toward the meeting, pausing briefly by the newly installed company timeline in the main lobby. It displayed the evolution of Davies software from my grandfather's garage startup to our current iteration as Davies Everest Technologies. My photo now hung alongside those of my grandfather and father, 3 generations of leadership, with my own achievements listed with the same prominence. Thanksgiving was approaching again, and this year would be entirely different. We had planned a smaller, more intimate family dinner without the performative traditions. No formal gratitude ritual, no business posturing, just a family still learning how to truly see and hear each other. The journey from rejection to leadership had been longer and more painful than I could have imagined. The challenges of merging family and business continued daily, requiring patience and perspective I was still developing. There had been moments when the weight of past hurts threatened to overwhelm the progress we had made, when old patterns of communication emerged in tense meetings or family dinners. The hardest part had not been the acquisition itself, but the ongoing work of building relationships that could withstand both our shared history and our current professional roles. Dad still occasionally slipped into his authoritarian approach before catching himself. I sometimes found myself unnecessarily defensive, anticipating dismissal that no longer came. Yet slowly, conversation by conversation, the Davies family was creating a new dynamic. Mom had hosted a dinner last month where, for the first time in my memory, everyone spoke equally. Everyone listened, and no one stormed out in anger. Small victories, but meaningful ones. Perhaps the most profound moment had come unexpectedly during a late night at the office when Dad and I were reviewing the first quarter results after the merger. The numbers had exceeded all projections. "You know," he had said quietly, staring at the spreadsheet, "you have already accomplished more than I did in my first decade running this company." The simple acknowledgement had healed something in me that I hadn't realized was still broken. Not because I needed his validation professionally anymore, but because it represented the human recognition I had sought all along. The experience had taught me that success itself is not enough to heal family wounds. The satisfaction of proving myself had been sweet but ultimately hollow until it led to genuine connection. I had needed to learn that there is a difference between winning and resolving, between being right and being whole. As I entered the conference room where Dad waited with the quarterly reports, I reflected on how complex the journey had been from that Thanksgiving revelation to today. The lesson I carried forward was not that success is the best revenge, but that success without reconciliation leaves both sides poorer. True victory came not when I proved my father wrong, but when we both found a way to be right together. For anyone watching this who recognizes the painful dynamics of family business, who has felt invisible or undervalued by those who should see you most clearly, I hope my story offers both inspiration and caution. Building your own success is powerful, but healing family wounds requires more than professional achievement. It demands honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to offer second chances, even when they seem undeserved. How did you navigate the complex intersection of family and business?